And back with Leslie Danks Burke, the Democrat State Senate candidate from Tompkins County. Leslie Danks Burke, thank you for joining us.
It's great to be with you on this beautiful morning, Brian.
It is nice out there today. Leslie Danks Burke, you and Tracy Matrano and a number of Republicans, Senator O'Mara, Assemblyman Palmisano, were at a Watkins Glen protest put on by a group called, I believe, Solidarity for Justice.
Exactly. We were there yesterday afternoon in Watkins Glen, and it was a group of young people who pulled together elected leaders and people running for office to give remarks.
And I'm on your Twitter page right now. Let me go back to what you just said. Oh, could you go over your remarks with us and what you said yesterday in Watkins Glen?
Sure. This event was somewhat different. I've attended several of the peaceful protests that have been happening across our region. It's extraordinary how the protests that we've seen here in our region have stayed entirely peaceful. Each of the protests that I have participated in, a police officer has been present and their car has led the march. It's really been an extraordinary opportunity to see real coming together for change. And yesterday's event was arranged by a couple of young people in Watkins Glen. I believe one recent high school graduate from Watkins Glen and one slightly older young woman from Montour Falls. And the point that I made at this event is that we need to hold our representatives accountable. And some of the same people who voted against reforms that are being called for across the country right now are showing up at rallies this weekend saying that they're going to stand with the protesters to fix the system, but this is a system that they have already voted to put into place. And today, the legislature in the state of New York is going back into session, and all eyes are going to be on those elected representatives to see if they just go right back and vote again against reform.
I'm on your website now, leslieforsenate.com. You talk about calling for a number of things, including an independent investigation. And this, as far as criminal justice reforms go, this is what you're calling for. Independent investigation of all police-involved injuries and fatalities, and independent prosecution when misconduct has been found. Also, a repeal of Section 50A to allow public access to information on police conduct and disciplinary actions. There were several others. Let's start out with the independent investigations that you're calling for, Leslie Danks Burke.
Exactly. When any organization is investigated, it should be someone independent investigating that organization. We have that checks and balances system in every facet of our democracy, and we certainly should have it in law enforcement as well. And that's just a basic rule of our democratic republic, that when you have someone investigating an organization, you make sure that investigation is independent, and we should have that with law enforcement as well. That's a pretty basic rule that seems to be appropriate.
Now, your opponent, Senator O'Mara, we had him on, I believe it was Thursday, and he was opposed to the idea of allowing freedom of information requests to access information on police misconduct, and disciplinary actions. What O'Mara said was that he felt that no one, police officers or otherwise, would want their personnel records made available to the public.
Well, there's all kinds of solutions for that, and Mr. O'Mara, in my view, is creating a mountain out of a molehill on that one. Personnel's health records and small infractions certainly would not be released to the public. But what we're talking about is when a police officer takes a step that really goes against the public interest. The public, as the employers of that police officer, should certainly know about that. And that's the sort of information that should be available through any sort of freedom of information request. That's what this country is founded on, is open and honest communication and disclosure of information. I certainly can't imagine why any police officer who is following the rules wouldn't want to have that be known.
Another thing that you're calling for here in your list of criminal justice reform legislative suggestions: require that body cameras be worn by all officers and prosecute officers who tamper with or remove cameras.
Exactly. What we're looking at here is the most recent murder of a black man by police officers in the murder of George Floyd. And that is the most recent one that we know of because it was captured on video. This is an opportunity for police officers who are following the rules, who are conducting themselves with honesty and integrity, to make sure that that is known and is available to the public. So when we have police officers who are treating black and brown people with a different set of rules, when black people are killed by the police 3.5 times as often as white people, then those many, many deaths become a real reason to make sure that we can see what's going on.
Governor Andrew Cuomo weighed in on the situation up in Buffalo where there was a protest going on last week, and a 75-year-old man was shoved to the ground. A couple of officers were suspended for that, and then you saw around 3 dozen Buffalo police officers. I wasn't clear if they stepped down from the police force or just from that particular unit. I think it was from that particular unit. Anyways, Governor Cuomo was very strongly outspoken on that issue. Wanted to get your thoughts there, Leslie Danks Burke.
Did you watch that video? I watched that video, and it was just, Brian, it was just horrifying. You watched the officers walk toward an elderly man who was just really standing there, and they reached out their arms and pushed him over, and he fell down. And then it looked to me about a couple of dozen police officers just kept walking right past his body where his ear was bleeding onto the ground. When you see that sort of brutality happening right there on camera and no one stepping up to do anything about it, these 2 police officers who pushed the man and then all the rest of them just walking past his body lying on the ground, that's horrifying. And we really need to address a systemic problem in this country where not only are police officers taking actions that really officers of the peace should not be taking, but their counterparts, their colleagues, are walking right past bodies lying on the ground and doing nothing. That is not security and safety, and that's not what we expect of our officers.
Talking to Leslie Danks Burke, Democrat State Senate candidate who's running against State Senator Tom O'Mara. Leslie, Governor Andrew Cuomo, wanted to get your thoughts on the governor's handling of the pandemic.
Governor Cuomo has done a great job, I think, of pulling together the state and getting all of us to focus on the issue at hand. But I think there's a lack of planning there that we're really seeing play out now. And so many different contexts, in the hospital context, in the school context, in the reopening of businesses context, we see one rule come down and then 48 hours later it changes again. And people can't operate that way. We need to have some consistency. We need to have some planning. To me, it's just outrageous that we don't have any sort of clearly coordinated message coming from the federal government. It's terrible that we're in a tragic period in American history and there's nothing of direction coming from the federal government. And we also just have a real mishmash of orders and conflicting advice coming from the state government. To me, we need to hold all of these guys accountable from the state level to the federal level, across the board. Come on, fellas. Let's get it together and get organized.
Talking to Leslie Danks Burke. Before I move on to graduations, I wanted to get your thoughts on the governor and the issue of nursing homes. Your opponent, Senator O'Mara, has been very outspoken, wanting an investigation into the way that the State Department of Health handled the nursing homes, allowing COVID patients to go into nursing homes. As you know, Leslie, that's been a big issue in this area. And again, Governor Cuomo has been heavily criticized by Senator O'Mara and Congressman Tom Reed. I wanted to get your thoughts there.
Well, thanks, Senator O'Mara, for calling for an investigation. But, man, you've been there for 16 years. And we have had problems across the board for years and years. And if you're only just waking up to it now, that's a real problem. I want to see all of these elected officials held to account for how mismanaged this system has been. We see our grandparents dying in nursing homes now. I believe 30% of the people who have died from coronavirus across the country have been people in nursing homes. I might not have that exactly right, but I'm pretty sure that's close to the number. And that is not a surprise to anyone, tragically. We knew that a pandemic was on the horizon. We knew that this was a real possibility, and yet we're warehousing our elderly in homes that just were not prepared and not given the resources that they needed to deal with this. So, in my view, it's great that Senator O'Mara is calling for an investigation now, but where were you, man, any time over the last 10 years that we knew this was coming? How come you're only just waking up to it?
We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back in just a moment. We'll talk about graduations being allowed and other issues with Leslie Danks Burke. Stay with us.
Springwater Amish Workshop in Springwater is once again open for business. You know, summer living is here. Enhance your outdoor living spaces with quality constructed Amish-made furniture and accessories of polyvinyl or southern yellow pressure-treated pine. Do your baby chicks need a home? Springwater Amish Workshop has chicken coops in stock. 2020 storage sheds and gazebos are arriving weekly, or they can order just what you want. That's Springwater Amish Workshop, 7936 Mill Street, that's Route 15, in Springwater. And check out their website, springwateramishworkshop.com, to see what they can do.
We check in now with meteorologist Rob Carrollin, who says it's going to be very nice today.
Oh, they don't get nicer than this, Brian, unless they fall on a Saturday or a Sunday. That's the only way today would be nicer. It is absolutely gorgeous out there this morning, looking at clear skies all the way from the Albany area out to Buffalo. We've got a little bit of fog in some of the deeper valleys down along the Pennsylvania border. That's about it. Any fog out there disappears in the valleys, and we end up with a bright, sunny day. Comfortable, too. We're about 75 this afternoon. A few spots may end up only getting up to about 70, but the nice thing is the lack of humidity. Very, very comfortable outside today. Should be clear. You open up the windows tonight for sleeping. Don't worry about the air conditioning. We'll cool back down to about 50 to 55. And by sunrise tomorrow morning, we could have a little bit of fog in some of the valleys. Tomorrow looks like a sunny, warmer day as high pressure moves offshore. Southwesterly winds will kick in. We'll pop up to 85 to 90 tomorrow afternoon. It'll be increasingly cloudy and more humid for tomorrow night, lows near 65. Brian, Wednesday's partly sunny and warm, 80 to 85, humid as well. Pretty good chance for some afternoon showers and thunderstorms as a cold front starts to head our way. That cold front will bring us much more comfortable weather for Thursday night and Friday. Sunrise earlier this morning was at 5:33. The sun sets tonight at 8:46.
Back on Newsmaker with Leslie Danks Burke, the Democrat State Senate candidate. Leslie, graduations. The governor was not quite sure where we were going to go with this, and then as time went by, the governor announced just yesterday he's going to allow graduations with up to 150 people and have social distancing rules in effect at these graduations. Your thoughts?
You know, this is another example of where the rules just keep changing. And my question is, where is the leadership? Where are the folks from upstate who are supposed to be at the governor's side, letting him know what we need here? You know, we don't live in New York City, in a city of millions and millions of people. We don't have the same sort of, crowd problems of people living in really close quarters that have allowed that pandemic to spread in New York City. And we need to be in there talking with the governor and letting him know what it is we need here upstate. And when I see representatives like my opponent, Senator Tom O'Mara, who are just throwing up their hands and walking away and saying, well, I can't do anything here, is just ridiculous because our children are suffering and the rules keep changing. We need someone in there who's going to stand up for us and actually get some attention to this region that we deserve.
Leslie Danks Burke, I wanted to talk a little bit more about the way the governor runs things. My observations, he puts out strict executive orders and or makes a statement which is almost kind of like a trial balloon kind of thing, sounding really strict, maybe wants to get a reaction. Then after some pushback, usually from upstate, he'll modify the original executive orders, and you don't really seem to agree with this style of governing.
I don't agree with that style of governing, and I think that it's really problematic that upstate is constantly reacting to that instead of getting to the table and participating in the conversation in the first place. And what I hear from one elected representative after another is that it's just not possible to get in there. Well, come on, get in your car and show up. Albany, the legislature has been out of session. They were out of session from April 3rd all the way to the beginning of June. That was a 2-month period for any one of our elected representatives in upstate New York to get in a car, go to Albany, and have a conversation with the governor where you can explain to him what it is that we need here. And all I'm seeing is our elected representatives, like my opponent, Tom O'Mara, throwing up their hands after the fact and whining because the governor didn't pay attention to us. This leadership style that you're describing, where the governor comes out with an executive order, upstate complains about it, and then he changes it, that's a solvable problem. You can get in there and get someone to the table and have a conversation beforehand so that everybody's on the same page. And I don't understand why we're settling for lazy representation like that.
Speaking with Leslie Danks Burke, Democrat State Senate candidate running against Senator O'Mara. Leslie, how's the campaign been going? COVID, a major interruption to so many lines of businesses. Guessing that you've had a chance to talk to farmers, small business owners. What are you hearing?
I have been convening groups of people from all walks of life to have conversations, and it's been extraordinary to hear the very different and yet also very similar experiences that so many of us are having. One pervasive theme across the board is how important internet is right now. We knew this before COVID-19 hit, but my goodness, the real failure on the part of our leadership here to make sure that broadband internet access got built out across upstate New York, that's really coming home to roost now because so many people need to be on their computers, kids, people running businesses, everything. You need to be able to get on internet to do it these days. And from our campaign perspective, we have that same challenge of reaching people digitally rather than in person as often. But one of the things that I've also noticed is that I'm a private citizen. I don't hold any elected office right now. I'm running for office, but I don't hold an office. And I've been able to convene these groups of people. I've been able to get in there with local business owners. We've had a couple of dozen small business owners who have been meeting weekly on a Zoom conference that I've put together to allow them to share tips back and forth. We've come out with plans and proposals for what could happen next for real concrete solutions to help small business owners in our region. And if I've been able to do that as a private citizen, then where the heck are our elected officials? I just don't see a real sense of urgency. I don't see them stepping up to the table and getting things done in the way that they're paid to do and elected to do.
Speaking with Leslie Danks Burke, we're down to the last 3 minutes or so. Kind of some surprising and unusual stories out of Corning. There's an accusation of a 51-year-old Corning resident killing a man and a 100-year-old man in a hammer attack. And there's another one on your opponent's Twitter page. This is a link to a suspect in Corning, attacking a 41-year-old man who was asleep with a sledgehammer. And Senator O'Mara here talking about police in Subban County have encountered this suspect more than 20 times since March. O'Mara there obviously making a reference to the bail reform ticket and release situation. Did you have any thoughts on bail reform, Leslie Danks Burke?
I think that it's really problematic when people can buy their way out of going to jail. And right now in this country, we have a system where wealthy people, like, there was a Republican assemblyman who was caught on a DWI just a couple of months ago, and he was able to pay his way out and not have to go to jail, and then other folks who can't afford to pay the bail are stuck in jail. So those fellows who are able to buy their way out and get back out on the street, that's really problematic.
Okay, down to the last 60 seconds. Any final thoughts, anything I did not bring up, Leslie?
Listen, we've got real opportunity here. I got to tell you, the young people who are leading the way right now to talk about inequality in our country, they're giving us an opportunity to see real hope. I think there's real conversations that we have on the horizon. There's a lot of people right now who feel demoralized by the state of the country, by the state of New York. I can see that, but let me tell you, if we're talking about it, that's the first step. And the biggest challenge to our democratic republic is apathy. And when people are engaged and participating and holding their elected officials accountable and saying, wait a minute, you're supposed to be in Albany standing up for us. You're supposed to be getting attention to us. That, to me, says we're on the right path. We're starting to talk about the challenges that we need addressed here in the Southern Tier and the Finger Lakes.
Leslie Danks Burke, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Brian. It's always a pleasure.